And we are recording. Okay, so this is episode 7, no, 8, episode 8 of the Feral Polymaths podcast with Gail Tal and
Maybe Quintana. We already started talking, so you guys missed it.
yeah, you guys missed a lot of stuff. But it's been about 6 months since our last podcast. We left off with the dental saga, which you'll be happy to know continues to this day, but I don't know that we can spend time on that. It's just amazing.
It is amazing. That's what we left off on. I think that's the level of devastated we both have been for like the last 6 months. It's just been a unrolling of incompetencies that we've stuck into.
Like, why are people bad and stupid, and why does it have to affect me, and why do I have to pay money for them being stupid at me?
It's the extra fun of life these days. The disintegration of society.
Yes. Well, I mean, I had that like dental thing, right? And then I went to that other dentist and I thought they were going to be good, but then they did the extra surgery and then I started having a problem after that.
Oh my God.
And I was trying to contact the dentist and then he basically just got annoyed. I was like, but this isn't normal. It's been a week and the pain is worse. And there's this weird white thing in here. It's like, that's just the scar or the scab. But I'm like, it's hard like bone. It took a full month because I just said, fuck it, and didn't go back in because I'm like, no one's going to do anything. A full month, a bone shield that had formed in there broke off. And I'm like, that is definitely bone. And then the bone stub went back in. And then a little more bone came out and went back in again. And then I had a week where a little bit of bone came out and everything hurt like hell down my jaw. And I had to basically like beg for antibiotics because I was pretty sure it was an infection. And they were like, I'm like, what the fuck is it if it's not infected, but it feels like it's all like, and then in December, I got sick with upper respiratory and this gross ass sinus thing because it had pierced my sinus when they did the thing. Something must have been in there. It was like death, like something dead in my sinus cavity. It kept trying to blow out my nose for like weeks, and then I got 2 different rounds of antibiotics. And again, the doctors were like, I don't know if it's a sinus infection. I'm like, it smells like death. Like, and it's been a month. Like, what do you think this is? Like,
what is in there?
I guess we'll give you antibiotics. Like, thanks. And then now I just get weird, sharp, stabby pains that go into my jaw and up into my ear. And that's just how life is now.
So now everyone knows how special you are that she's talking to you.
Oh, man.
Yeah, the only time I've ever heard of anything like that severe that stuck in the sinus is from surfers who like hit the ocean and like get sea creatures shoved up their noses.
That sounds fun.
Or other like horrible biotic things that end up lodged in there and grow and add up to horrible pain. But yeah, any infection in there can, I mean, the thing that's really scary about that also is, that whole area into the mastoid and everything is connected.
Like your brain is right there.
Your brain is right there. Exactly. Like you'd think they'd be more concerned about the potential of an infection in your head right there when you've had a surgery and something else went wrong. But
man, I don't even know anymore. Yeah. And before we started recording, I was telling Mary Leah the tales of woe of my poor 13-year-old daughter who has like arm pain, numbness, and tingling that we cannot get anyone to diagnose nor treat in any way. Well, we can't give her pain medicine if we don't know what it is. We can't give her nerve pain medicine if we haven't for sure made sure it was nerves, even though it's pain, numbness, tingling, stabbing, burning feelings. Like, if she misses school, she's crying, she can't use her arms half the time. I'm like, can we treat this?
No treatment for like a physical debilitating disorder. But if you say you have anxiety, do you know how many people will line up?
Drugs just come out of the woodwork.
Child. They'll be like, we've got these, we've got those.
Yeah. Well, that's one of their recommendations is that she should see a mental health therapist.
Jesus Christ.
So yes.
Which,
Yes.
if there were huge life events that might actually be related to that, or something that she was severely like not wanting to do in her life, that was, you know, motivated by someone outside of herself, then maybe you'd have something to go
I don't
on.
even know, man. I don't even. We are seeing a physical therapist soon.
I think
Hopefully,
that's,
they're able to figure something out.
well,
But
you already had a
it's
physical therapist say that they thought she had a physical problem.
She had a dance teacher who suggested what the issue is that I can't seem to get anyone to try to diagnose, even though they ruled out all the things. And I'm like, so is it this thing that matches all of her symptoms? And they're like, well,
That's
that's
really,
somewhat uncommon. Oh, okay. What is it? We don't know.
and we
Then can
can't.
we test for this thing that it matches
Oh
exactly?
no.
I
Why?
don't know how to do that. Why don't you go see this other person?
Not
We'll
in,
do some more blood tests. Maybe her iron is low. Like, okay, thank you.
yeah,
It's so bad.
we're
God,
living
it's so bad.
just as
Ah, and have you told your Yale people uterus story
oh
on
no,
this podcast before?
well, I don't know. I brought it up before because that podcast was, what was that from? Was it from Serial? I don't remember who did it. But they had interviewed all of these women who went through this experience, and I'm just gonna say out up front that the end result of all of the investigation was that there was a woman, a nurse, who was stealing pain medication that was meant to be there for women who were getting their eggs harvested as a fertility treatment. So they're going to fertility clinics, and what's happening to them is they go in, they're getting their eggs harvested, and in the middle of the procedure, some of them are saying, "What the? I am in pain." And the doctors are like, well, that's not possible. We gave you pain medication. And but they're like, we no, this is horrible. And the other thing that would go happen is that because the timing for harvesting eggs is so severe, women would just go with it. They would say, keep going because I have no choice but to like harvest these eggs at this moment, and it's insanely expensive. So bah. And this was all used against them later on when they tried to bring a lawsuit against these doctors who dismissed many of them. Like there's a whole host of women that this happened to who insisted that they were in pain and were completely dismissed. And it's just astonishing. I think about it a lot because the final conclusion of the whole thing was that you can't even sue these doctors for the experience of the pain that they were in, precisely because if you look at other doctors, and that's the legal definition of whether it's worth suing over,
Or
is
whether it meets the standard of care.
exactly. But if they go to another doctor and they ask them, oh well, if you had a patient like this who was telling you they were in pain and you gave them pain medication, would you have gone forward? And they're like, yeah, that's what I would do.
So
I would
because
totally just
all doctors would dismiss their pain, that was the standard of care. They had met the standard of care. They could not be sued.
And what's interesting is that there is a total gender difference between these two things. Men's pain is provably taken more seriously than women's pain across the board. And so your daughter's like encountering this hardcore right out the gate, pain missed. And
Yeah, and she's a tough girl too. Like she knows how to push through things. And she's telling me how she's like sitting in class and the pain is so bad that what she does is she stares at the wall and basically dissociates out of her body in order to survive being there. I'm like,
no wonder she's so interested in like these yogic practices of overcoming pain. She's trying to solve her own problem with her own pain, which is what she always does, right? Like,
I mean, we give her all the over-counter drugs we can. We have Googled all of the stretching and the exercises that might help, and she does those. And it's just, it comes and goes. Like she has bad days, and then she has days where it's mostly fine, and then there's like a bad day again where she feels like her arms are going to fall off, or what? How did she put it once? It felt like they were trapped. Her arms were trapped in an Iron Maiden that was set on fire. Like that doesn't sound pleasant.
that's miserable. Also, it
Yeah.
doesn't sound very similar to other experiences of like psychological
Yeah, the suggestion yesterday that it could be like, I'm like, I don't think this is psychological. It definitely correlates with physical activity and use, and the movements match this certain thoracic outlet syndrome that we keep, every time I Google her symptoms, I keep coming back to again and again and again. And I'm like, the guy, what are the stressors in this child's life? Um, she doesn't like math, and sometimes she leaves her homework to the last minute. But she's in 8th grade. She's not like what, she lives a pretty happy life with all of her friends and activities and pets, and like we're I don't know what traumatic event occurred that is making her I don't even know, but I hate that. I hate that. Like, and the person told us this whole time, well, I've never diagnosed this thing, so I don't really know, but maybe it's in her head. Like, okay.
You know what? I'm thinking that it's exactly the phenomena of that reverse, that like reverse implication of a physical manifestation, meaning you had childhood trauma. Like, I think,
oh yeah, that's what we were going to talk about in this episode. Do you want to introduce this whole idea?
Well, we were talking about how what we've been thinking together about how the confluence of these dichotomies in psychology or in approaches to life, and even I think just in society in general, where you have on one side thinking about the person as a whole, like body embodied, like the brain body connection, and whether things in the body are related to things in the brain, the lifelong experience connection, whether things in your childhood make you who you are today, or whether what you're experiencing today, implies something in your childhood, or miracle of miracles, if something that's happening today is causing what's happening today and it has nothing to do with your childhood potentially. And what does that all mean? Are there how much room do you have for nuance within different frameworks?
Yeah, I mean, we basically have this very popular story in modern society that I trying to trace it back. I think it really started out of like the recovered memory movement and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where there's this modern, like, if you're having difficult times, if you're experiencing anxiety, if something is happening, like it's a trauma response because you must have had some kind of trauma, or if there's certain things in your past, like they're going to come up and they're going to affect how you feel today about things. And so because we have that story in the modern culture, people look for it and then experience it. But there's a whole, like, yes, sometimes when people are heavily traumatized, it affects them later in life and throughout their lives. But I think there's a whole lot of also people looking for, I don't feel good today. Maybe that time my parents said that thing is, oh yes, that's it. I'm feeling it. It's very intensely. And so you start manifesting it just because of that. And so there's a lot to I'm just going to keep talking over you, Mary Leah, so just be quiet right now.
I'm excited to hear what you're saying. I only do this because I'm excited. It's very rude of me. So I felt
no, I'm the one that's like talking over you, but I'm just going to keep going.
Go. I love it.
But basically, so I've been thinking a lot about like how what we think and the way we interpret the world has to do with the stories that are told in our local society. If you look at certain types of mental health issues, there's certain ones that only appear in certain societies or during certain time periods because they became popular lore. I don't remember the details. Like there's some tribe somewhere where everyone, if the men get anxious, they're anxious about their penis falling off or something. Like that's like a common thing, right? Whereas like I don't think we experience much of that here unless the men are just keeping that all to themselves.
You know, tell us.
But yeah, so a lot of how people manifest, or not even manifest, how they explain or describe mental ailments of some kind will very much be informed by what the common narrative is. So if the common narrative is, if you have anxiety or depression, that's a trauma response because something bad happened in your past. Well, if that's the stories you're always hearing, then when you have anxiety and depression, you pick something in your past and decide that was a thing that traumatized you.
Right.
And
And you don't
also, yeah,
like,
you
I
keep
lost my
going
job.
forward, you keep looking for new traumas and decide they're traumas that are going to keep affecting you. And the
Well,
thing is, everything we experience in life affects us in some
yeah,
way.
absolutely. We are continuous with our past. So it's not like we can
But
discount what we
our
learned
default
as a child.
mode is resilience. That's actually the default mode, is not to be permanently traumatized and damaged by negative things that occur, but to overcome them and
And
move on with our lives.
also, just identifying something in your past to be upset about is not the goal of overcoming your anxieties in the
Mm-hmm.
present. Like, to identify something that you found in your past that is affecting your present, the goal of doing that is to actually come over the hump using that knowledge and applying it to your current situations, and either compare the past to the reality of the present and decide, oh right, that's in the past, I'm okay now, or to see how it's actually impacting you currently, if it's somehow ongoing, and overcome it, eliminate it, do whatever you can to do that. And the other thing I think is interesting is it's very convenient too, because it forces us to discount anything societal that's happening that screws us over.
There's a
Like,
lot societal that's happening. That's like, we could go on and on about the social isolation from both the pandemic, but also modern technology and how that interrupts natural human interactions. And
like,
I mean, I work from home, work remotely, and I have very minimal human interactions. I can tell you it affects me psychologically.
of course.
And I was like on a high after I was at a conference for a week. And then I come back and I'm like, now I'm
Oh,
sad again. I'm like, but I know why I'm sad. So I'll go to the CrossFit gym,
see
punish
humans.
my body while interacting with humans. Yes, because that's all I got. That's all I got going on.
But look, A+ for exercise improving mental health too.
Yes, yes. Although it always feels like, I think I'm finally getting to the point where after a workout, you get that workout high. But for the longest time, it was like, I'm going to go punish myself and then feel shittier afterwards for hours. Oh, looking forward to it. Getting healthy.
But that's good. You're getting the experience now of like, ooh, this was not so bad. Well,
Yeah, now I'm getting all
hey, hey,
strong.
the default is resilience. Your body is adapting to
Exactly.
the challenge you've given
You
it.
adapt over time. So, but it's true. There's oh, I can't remember this person's name, but I used to follow them on Twitter. A mental health person, but used to
Right.
talk about, like, all the research behind, like, you go a little further back in time and people are amazingly resilient. They have all sorts of traumas that happen in their lives. They just overcome, you incorporate, you move on. But now in this modern era, it's like everything is a trauma. Oh no. And it's reinforced. And it really, like, kids and teens, like, can be really susceptible to this messaging if you aren't trying to counteract that with them.
That is
So it is
very
tough. They will latch on to shit and be
well.
like, oh, this thing happened and now I'm traumatized. You're like, no, you're not, because you're a person and people have always had this happen. Let's ground ourselves for a while in reality. We can
Right.
have these feelings, but they will pass. There's ways around this.
Yeah, and speaking of reinforcing it, you don't need just like a mental health professional to help you do that, which they may well have. You also have the entirety of the internet who will happily give you beautiful cartoons and sketches and life explanations and blogs and confessionals about how they too are traumatized and how no one except for them understands you, especially not your parents.
Exactly. Parents that can possibly comprehend anything about you. It's not like they've been like watching you since birth, interacting you with since the day you were conceived, and like seen how you've grown and developed, and then have also been through that process themselves at some point in time. No, no,
Exactly.
no. The parents don't know anything about their own children. It's very important.
Yeah, and a lot of children aren't aware of like how it benefits a person, what like the formulas with which a person gathers views and gathers an audience, which have been used by religion and every other, gathering an audience mechanism of society throughout time. But that those techniques can be very manipulative. They don't they're not really clued into the idea that someone who's just telling their story might be inviting them
And
to.
not even intentionally manipulating them, but just propagating a concept because they're sucked into it as well.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it goes back to the book that we both read and loved, the Coddling of the Mind, those like 3 untruths.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone hasn't read this book, The Coddling of American Mind, and it's Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt, I believe, are the authors. You got it. You got it with you right now.
No, I don't have that one, but I have Fire Quarterly here.
Oh, okay. That's I think that's Lukianoff's organization. Yeah, yeah.
Like free speech and
So
all stuff.
yeah, but their book, I mean, you've read it just I've read it a few times, but you just read it. So give us your take. Give us your summary.
Well, I mean, they do this beautiful job of summarizing. I mean, they're coming from an academic and a psychological perspective where they have experienced that their students were embracing these fundamental principles that they felt were eroding their ability to analyze what was actually happening around them. And I think there are 3 untruths. You're going to have to help me with this because recent.
I'm Googling.
No, it's that what is it? What doesn't make you stronger? What doesn't kill me makes me weaker. So in other words, things that I experience diminish me, and I'm not able to be resilient. I'm not able to face challenges. I am not adequate, basically. And I'm very fragile.
That's the basic. Succumb to anything that was difficult in your life and decide that it has now traumatized you in a way that's going to make you less functional moving forward.
And these guys are not like Nietzschean. They're not saying like, oh, or they're not even saying like, oh, definitely put yourself in harm's way. And
no, but don't take every negative thing that ever happens to you as somehow a permanent scar that will leave you weakened for life. So it's the whole contrast that like people have sort of absorbed this notion that what doesn't kill you makes you weaker, right? Versus the older adage that makes you stronger because you've overcome it and now you have coping skills for hard things.
Exactly. That obstacles are actually debilitating.
Mm-hmm.
And another one was about sort of social interaction that oh God, what is it?
So life is a battle between good people and evil people.
Exactly, this black and white thinking type of idea where you regardless of what that there is no ability to have nuance if someone espouses an opinion that is contrary to what you've decided is your opinion.
This always makes me think of like political arguments where people are like, I will never talk to my Trump voting uncle. And whereas I'm like, oh, I want to know why he thinks that way or what conclusions he's coming to or what media he's absorbing that's making him think this is, like I'm happy to talk to anyone of any political stripe because there's nuance there and you're not actually going to understand the other side of something unless you know what they are seeing and what they are perceiving, right? Because it's not what you think they are perceiving or perceiving.
And also, if you do this across the board, are you really that confident that every single opinion you have is the right one in every single case?
Yeah, because you're just completely shutting off anything that disagrees with you. Like, this is bad. These people are bad.
That doesn't mean you have to change your mind. That doesn't mean you have to, you might come to the same.
You don't have to agree with them, but
also,
you can still be friends with them.
And you can also, you can also realize that the harder questions in the world probably don't have a single yes or no answer. There's probably a lot of different reasons why certain aspects of what someone else has to say are relevant to the conversation, and just taking a hot button issue and deciding everything on your stance on that one thing probably doesn't encompass any of the actual experiences that you're going to encounter in life day in and day out. And that probably you're living a very similar life to somebody who has a different opinion about that. And probably you agree on a lot more things than you think you do. And yeah, there's a lot of nuance there that is getting lost in thinking that way and deciding that you are good and they are evil. And it would be really weird if you decided that you were the evil one and everyone else was good. I guess that means you're like really depressed. I don't know.
Well, that's the third untruth, is the always trust your feelings.
That's the
because
first one.
obviously they can never be distorted by your current emotional state or with things like that.
Yeah.
Right?
And this is the one that they heavily relate to their encounter with cognitive behavioral psychology, which, you know, demonstratively is able to list these cognitive distortions that people experience. I think there's like 20 of them or 12 of them. You know, everything from catastrophizing to black and white thinking, or, you know, there's multiple stories that we tell ourselves, self-talk that we give ourselves that don't connect with reality.
And aren't mentally helpful and can leave you kind of stuck.
And that questioning them actually makes you feel better.
Yeah.
And that's the process of cognitive behavioral psychology. And
hold on, I'm pulling up 13 cognitive distortions. We got overgeneralization, mental filters, mind reading, thinking you know what someone else thinks, predictive thinking, jumping to conclusions, discounting the positive, magnification, I mean, just distorting things in general, right? Emotional reasoning, shouldn't and must statements, black and white thinking, catastrophizing, personalization and blame, and labeling. And this is cognitive behavioral therapy is a type of psychological intervention that tries to help you around these distortions, which tend to reinforce negative thought cycles and problems in your life, basically.
And it's one of the most heavily scientifically backed methods of psychological therapy, and has outcomes that are kind of on par with a lot of medicating of, say, depression and anxiety, especially. So
so if you're able to put like if you suppose you're a teenager and your parents are evil because they have made these strict rules, your friends don't have the same rules, your parents are bad. That's a cognitive distortion, right? The better approach to that would be trying to understand that your parents have logical reasons for the choices they're making, and they're in your best interest because your parents actually love and care about you, and that you may disagree, but maybe you can have a conversation about that instead of just deciding that, you know, your parents are the Antichrist and we must disown them.
Unless your parents are indeed raising a
the Antichrist,
or psycho, not, what is it? Psychopath has been born. I forget the other one. If they're actually raising an antisocial child who's going to become a serial killer, then probably they don't care about you and they are doing all kinds of fun things to make you a horrible person. But
or you were just born that way.
That's extreme.
And then they're just putting all these rules to try to like make you not become a murderer. This is derailed. I think we've gone down a.
Oh, those are rare. So most likely your parents care and you're not having a horrible time. I can definitely say that about my children. At least.
I mean, I care about my children quite a bit, but every once in a while they're like, "Oh, why are you being mean?" Except I'm usually a pushover. My husband's the mean one, you know. And I'm being a pushover, like, no, you are going to take out the trash and you're going to do it now, not in an hour when you will forget and then it won't happen. And then the garbage can will overflow. And then, you know, not that that has ever occurred in our house.
You know, connecting reality with household contribution, you know?
But yeah, their whole book, The Coddling of the American Mind, really talks about how there's sort of these prevailing notions in society that are reinforcing negative ways of thinking and unproductive and unuseful ways of thinking and ways of thinking that lead to more depression and anxiety. And we know
And that
the
more and
rates
more,
of depression and anxiety are skyrocketing, right?
yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is why they have those three untruths that people seem to keep thinking that way. And that's really not the way to think.
Yeah, and it seems to be escalating in those directions as well as time goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about rereading that book is that really we're in a moment where the history of psychology is kind of moving us in these directions, right? Because if you think about it, initially with Freud, with say hysteria, you're getting this physical thing. The very first thing that they conclude about these crazy women and their horrible physical ailments is that there's a physical problem with them. They have got a bad uterus that fucking with them. We don't know what to do. Maybe we should rip it out. Maybe we should
God, those women just always going crazy. It has nothing to do with, I mean, to be fair, women are just on average more socially connected, socially manipulated and manipulatable. And then you have hormonal cycling, which can sometimes make you crazier times a month. But how much of our supposed craziness is because when people keep not listening to you or taking anything you say seriously, you start losing your shit, right? Like I have a brain and thoughts that I can contribute to the conversation, and everyone's telling me to shut up and wash the dishes. That would make anybody crazy, wouldn't it?
That's a really good, well, I mean, in a way, that's what Freud concluded, right? Like, oh, it's like a Victorian era. There's like psychologists writing about how, it might be good for kids to get raped by their father. I'm pretty sure it's totally fine. Like, they survive. Gotta learn it somewhere, And so these people are going up being like, no, this is fucked up. I'm not very happy. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with her. I just diddled her a couple times. What's the problem?
I mean, God, I know, like, in my life, the things that have made me most crazy are when, like, I know something to be true or valid or provable, and the people around me are, like, dismissing or blind and so you're like, is my reality reality? I've freaking gone to the root of the problem, and I got my bullet point list, and I'm able to show everyone these things, and everyone's like, what are you doing over there?
Why?
That's not useful. Like, oh my God. Anyway, not that that's ever.
Why are you trying to tell us things?
What are you doing with your opinion or thoughts over there? Those aren't anything we care. Those aren't real. Your opinions and thoughts aren't real.
On facts. Thank you very much. Yeah, so thinking about this, like, we've got Freud over here. We've got the initial reaction. Definitely it's physical, and definitely it's your uterus because it's all women. Men are totally fine and super sane.
Because I have all the power in society.
No. Check that out. Doesn't work. Still crazy. Freud comes along. Totally got to be your childhood. Okay. All right, we've got these different ideas of the subconscious and all of this stuff, and up to a point that's helping, but it takes years and years and years and years and years of talk therapy with very manipulative people who also end up diddling their patients. So that doesn't help. So then you get what? B.F. Skinner and what's his name? Wilson, not Wilson. Founder of behaviorism. What was his name? Watson, right? No, that's Watson. Yeah, Watson.
Googling founder.
Watson, not Watson and Crick, but different Watson.
John B. Watson.
Yeah. So you get these guys coming along and saying, maybe it's what's reinforced. Maybe it's what you're actually doing in the moment that contributes to learning. And you're going to react to your environment and what's immediately in front of you. And that's what's going to determine what you can do. And you get these really aggrandized claims about that, where, I think it was Watson who said, give me a child and I'll produce whatever you want out of that child. Which was
anyone who has parented more than one child knows this to not be a
no, you can't.
This one's like that. This one's like that.
You could
I
turn
did the same thing. What's happening?
you can turn into something else entirely. You can train a dog for sure. Very helpful. And cognitive behavioral therapy sort of wanted to stretch the behavioral ideas into actual thoughts and acknowledging the idea that people don't just have like reactions or reinforceable actions that come from their immediate environment and what's being reinforced, or learning in the behavioral sense. They also think things, and that changes what they do. And if you attack those thoughts in a behavioral way, in other words, reinforcing or you know eliminating certain ways of thinking and using that framework on yourself consciously, then you can move beyond that stuff. And that's been really powerful and really amazing up to today. However, what's happening now is you are getting to where, all right, and now men are involved because you have things like PC.
To be fair, we like men. I also know that men, like on bell curves, they usually have the broader bell curves where you get the really high, happy, successful ones, and then you get the ones we shit on and we don't care about.
Well,
and then we send them to war as cannon fodder. So
well,
men have their own.
They have their own problems
they deal with.
Society is messing with them as well, for sure.
Yes.
Well, and that's exactly where they end up in psychology. You have them popping up in psychology with, shell shock and post-traumatic stress, and, having, if you're in behaviorists, taking a little boy and clanging a bong every time he sees a bunny and getting him afraid of fur. So,
have you done this? Like,
that was an experiment, yeah.
Okay, that's exciting.
That was to do.
But yeah, this makes me think too of there's this book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And it basically just talks about the two different ways we go about like thinking a thought or making a decision. And one is the fast way, which is usually just built on instinct patterns, quick response, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the slow one where you're actually analyzing things more systematically, right? The quick one is useful in many situations because it's quick, but it's wrong a lot of the time. The fast one the slow one is great because you actually consider things more deeply, you're having more deep thoughts, you're putting everything in there. But it's not very fast. And so like what you're saying with the cognitive distortions, those are fast thinking, right?
Yeah.
That's like, I immediately see this in black and white and that's how I'm progressing. But if you stop, you can sort of rewire what that fast response ends up being in the future to something more productive and less damaging to your overall ability to function.
And I think this is the goal of this is the cognitive part of cognitive behavioral therapy, is to engage the frontal lobe, to engage your executive function and use its power to influence the the limbic system underneath it that's going nuts. And that has been, I mean, it is an incredibly powerful thing. And I think that part of the reason that people are more susceptible to like the way original version of psychology now is because now there is a story beyond that where you're encountering somebody like someone with post-traumatic stress, or someone who is, the whole literature around trauma itself is starting to expose these things that cognitively it's very hard to overcome because they're ingrained in a much deeper way. And so you're having to go back to previous methods of trying to get to the root cause of why that has had such impact, right? And that's where you have this new blossoming of all these different psychologists who are trying to bring to bear the new ideas about the brain-body connection. They're trying to bring to bear an understanding of somatic reactions. Why is it that exercise and yoga and all this touchy-feely stuff impacts your feeling of stuckness, if what's supposed to impact your feeling of stuckness is thinking better thoughts about it. So there are all of these things that are also implying that in addition to thinking about it, sometimes thinking isn't enough. You also have to tie in. It's really what should be happening now is a bringing together of the impact of changing your cognition with the impact of retraining your lizard brain, you know, which probably started in childhood because that's what you got exposed to and how those things develop. So what should be happening is those two things are coming together, and instead they're on like opposite sides, and people are willing to die for one or the other.
There was a very interesting podcast that both you and I have listened to. I'm blanking on the name of it now, but it's the one with the woman and the talking about her experience with the recovered memory movement and how she's basically going into detail about how that, like, there was this whole notion that if you have anxiety or problems in your life, it's because you have repressed memories of something traumatic. And so then you try to find those repressed memories, and you usually can come up with something if you think hard enough, right? Or you start basically confabulating things that never happened.
This is the logical beauty of the repressed memory idea, is that if it's repressed, it could be anything.
It could be anything. And you can sort of come up with subtle hints of what it might be and then start making up your own stories, not even completely consciously, right? Like you might just be really reaching so far, you find your brain makes something up to fill in these gaps that you've made for it. And in this podcast, she goes through how she sort of fell into that trap and way of thinking and what it did and why she got there and how she got out of that way of thinking. It's really fascinating. Did you find it? I can't remember what it's called.
I'm trying. I think you sent it. What did you send it to me? What do you listen to podcasts on?
I don't know. Let's see.
Spotify. I know I listened to
find it. Looking. Let's see. Everyone gets to wait while we search through our podcast.
No, but you guys. I mean, otherwise we just say things. Look up. I mean, the thing that's amazing about us not having to remember anything is that you guys could just go and Google yourself. Woman repressed memory podcast. Super cool.
Yes. Is it? It's not the Nobody Should Believe Me one, is it?
No.
What is this one? Oh no, that's a Munchausen. I listen to all the good podcasts.
All the wonderful things to be scared of today.
Yeah. How do you think I should be able to find this? Is it The Memory Hole?
The Memory Hole. That's it.
The Memory Hole. Yes, The Memory Hole podcast.
The Memory Hole, and it's
absolutely fascinating.
It was really, really well done, and yeah, she really tackles how there really isn't a lot of evidence for the idea of a repressed memory,
but also like a personal account of how once you have that story in your sphere of things that you think to be true, that you can fall into that cognitive trap and start manifesting things that weren't even an issue before, and confabulating a history or thinking things are connected that aren't, and then start feeling worse because of it, even though what you think you're doing is somehow uncovering things to heal, or so there's all sorts of cognitive traps we can get ourselves into. What a world.
Reaching for catharsis and like instead kind of just coming up with another reason to feel shame and pain and detach yourself from your family or detach yourself from whoever you think wronged you. And it's a downward spiral. That said, like for people who have actually experienced something and are trying to come to terms with that, they've already got their hands full with, something to do. You don't need to make it up to.
And that's the thing that she really gets into, is it's not even really a making it up completely, because it's more of a, you've just bought into the story, and so you're just kind of, you're convinced of it. You don't think you're making it up. You are convinced of it the whole time.
Being given a checklist and being told, we will be able, this is our diagnostic. If you have any of these symptoms, you probably had this. Like if someone's giving you that prescriptive idea of what those things mean, you know, it's somewhere between and they have also the authority of claiming to be doctors or claiming to be therapists or claiming to be clinicians of some kind, whether they are or not, or scientists. You're going to look at that, name your pieces, and believe that that's you. And it's as powerful as a diagnosis, or as powerful as a you know, astrological chart. You know, you believe.
Yeah, astrology is a really good analogy here.
Yeah, you can easily be. There's something about human beings that's susceptible to being told this
You
is.
want to find patterns and connections.
Yeah. Exactly. And if you're given a checklist and you're given a you know, a system that's complex and fine enough to like map yourself onto it, it's very, very compelling. Very, very compelling.
It's storytelling. I mean, that's the thing I keep coming back to with so many aspects of life. It's the stories we tell, right? That's what we're always drawn to. It's not like a list of facts that you remember, it's the story you remember. And way back before history was recorded, how did people share ideas? I don't think it was by factual recountings. It was by stories, embellishments, tales of, that really brings all the ideas together in a compelling way that you connect with, right? That's way more, it's going to last longer, it's going to propagate longer than the list of actual facts that occurred in their most objective form. Right?
Yeah. And so then you're left, so then, you're given a lot of compelling reasons to believe your own stories. Yeah. I mean,
you start building a story around yourself and what your past is, what your history is, what the characters in your life mean, whether they're the good ones or the evil ones, who's the hero, and all of that.
And I think that that's the most compelling reason to question these things and to really see whether that's helping you or hindering you. I mean, the only hesitation I had with that podcast is that she did try to go into a scientific analysis where she was really down on a lot of the more contemporary psychologists, saying that I thought sort of built a straw man, because I think most contemporary psychologists are not saying if you have these symptoms, therefore you have childhood trauma. Instead,
well, that was the body keeps the score book that she was referencing and stuff. Yeah. But it's mixing the cause and effect, right? So they're saying more that if you have had trauma, you might have these effects, versus if you have these symptoms, it means there's a repressed trauma.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the message that a lot of people get out of that book, precisely because they're looking for some way to relate to it. So most of the book is about, I mean, most of the people that the psychologist encounters have had a trauma. That's why they're coming to him. And so when he tells their story and people relate to it, they're like, oh, me too. And if there's no apparent trauma that you've had, you're not relating to that because you also have had trauma. You're relating to that because this is part of the human experience. And it's not a panacea, really. I think that there is something to be said about approaching trauma through the physical. There's something beyond medication, and there's something beyond just cognitive behavioral therapy that I think,
because we aren't brains in vats. We are brains inside bodies that interact with the outside environment constantly.
So anyone who's trying to tackle embodying and therapizing oneself through improving the relationship with the body, and realizing that, certain types of trauma, especially like, rape and things like that, can have a bodily reaction that's really ingrained. I mean, that would make sense. It doesn't mean that you're going to be like that for the rest of your life. No, it doesn't have to mean that. Like, you don't have to, like, that's the whole point of doing the therapy, is to try to get beyond that, right? But instead,
versus reinforcing it and deciding like, oh, all of my distortions about current reality are justified, so I'm going to wallow in them and feel worse.
Or that this is what defines me entirely, and I'm going to have this, and I'm always going to have these pains, and I'm never going to be able to have sex, and all this horrible stuff, which of course anyone who has been through something like that might believe about themselves, but does not want to believe about themselves. And yeah, anyone who's selling you a therapeutic goal of being a traumatized victim permanently is not a very good therapist.
Yes, and it's unfortunately a trend that
Yeah, the label, well, it's weird, the precise cognitive distortion that of labeling that one is supposed to tackle in therapy is
and that
exactly what therapy seems to be.
yeah, and there's also there's like this common notion that whatever your experience was is completely valid and
That's dangerous.
all of that. And the thing is a lot of the times, if you're not mentally healthy, your experience is heavily distorted, and you need to like figure out why it's distorted so you can undo the distortion and actually experience a happier existence.
And it's so dangerous because it could freaking kill you, guys.
Mm-hmm.
It could kill you. Being stuck in your thoughts, if your thoughts are threatening you,
you don't need confirmation. You don't need like someone to confirm that they're valid, right? Like those aren't the ones we want to.
I mean, yeah, you might need to be able to accept things that you know for a fact actually happened, but that's in the process of like figuring out a way to deal with them or to get somewhere where you're, I mean, especially when it comes to your parents, if you're living at home, those are the conditions that you actually have. Like, I don't know. It also, I think there's also, you have to really think about who you can trust to in a real way.
Yeah, right. Because there's going to be some things that you do need confirmed that you thought and experienced, and other things that you need to be told are discordant with realities so that you can overcome them, right? And so you need someone who can differentiate the two.
And maybe it's not always just like the person who's getting paid. We can
maybe you should have friends.
Maybe not just that. Like diversify the input that you're getting.
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah. And yeah, I do think that leading a less isolated life is a big part of it. I think the part
because then you get a lot more direct input from every action or thing that you do, right? And that feedback helps you place yourself in the world and figure out what you got going on versus just living in your head, in your office, alone,
like
thinking into the void.
Thank goodness we have friends. We have friends. We have friends.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, I do have a husband. I do talk to him about things. But, that's like one person who is grumpy half the time because he doesn't like his job.
Oh.
But that is what it is.
But he knows why he's grumpy.
He does know why he's grumpy. And I'm fairly certain he would find a different reason to be grumpy if his
then it's definitely his mom. I can tell you.
I love him dearly. He has his, we all have our issues.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Healing together.
Yeah. It's all about complementing each other, right? Like,
that's right. Yeah.
Not reinforcing. You can't both be in a bad mood at the same time. You got to alternate that shit.
Oh yeah, you got to tag team with that one because it's tough. If you're both down, man, everything starts to crash and burn.
Like we were doing our taxes, and I was like, because I always get stressed out by it, and he always likes to catastrophize it, and I was like, you need to go away, so I'm not getting my negative thoughts reinforced, and then I will call you in if I need you to figure something out I don't want to deal with anymore. And it worked quite well.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
So I was like, I'm frustrated. What the fuck is happening? I tried to read you here. I'm leaving.
You know what? Well, it's actually a really strong thing that you were able to say that to him and that he was able to respond and that you both liked the outcome. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Worked very well. We were both like, this is going to create a negative feedback loop.
Oh, so smart.
Let's not.
You're identifying the negative cycles and not blaming each other. See, science psychology at work.
Yes.
All you have to do is go back and find your childhood attachment styles, and you'll be cured.
I was the second born child, and my older brother was very needy. And then I had other siblings born after me, so I was kind of in the middle. And
I'm pretty sure we could come up with a pretty good.
Oh, we can make all sorts of narratives describing.
Next week we analyze our childhoods. Complete contradiction of everything we've said.
Exactly. But it's very easy to do. You can very easily, like, this is true with most things in life that I've discovered. Like, a situation has occurred, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And there's a way you can describe that situation where everything you're saying is true, but it paints a certain picture. And then you can describe it in an entirely different way, again, saying things that are true, but it paints an entirely, it's like cherry picking to a degree, but it's more like the frame through which you're viewing it. So you pick the collection of facts that reinforce the idea you've decided is the reality, right? I mean, but you can totally pick a different set.
It's kind of like physics, right? Like, it depends on what you're trying to describe and to what.
Are we measuring to see if this is a particle? Well, then it is. Are we measuring to see if this is a wave? Well, then it is. Which is it? Well, what are you measuring?
Guess what? The observer influences this one.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really important. I do think that that's something about a scientific background in the larger sense that is helpful in analyzing these things, is that you're used to a single narrative never being the whole picture.
Always trying to poke holes in it. Where could this be wrong? What might be an alternative explanation for this, and so on. Yep.
Exactly.
It can also make people hate you because you're like, actually, did you think about it could just be this, and maybe you're wrong, because if we look at it this way, just because your mind is always doing that. So even if you agree with the person, you're still like, well let me tell you why it could still be wrong.
And you see, since everybody's good people and bad people, that's a really good way to always make yourself the evil one. That's all.
Yes.
We can all be the Antichrist just by questioning things.
Good stuff. Well, I think we might wrap up this episode. I think we had a very good conversation about psychological thinking holes and whatnot. And visit feralpolymaths.com. Maybe we'll post new stuff on there at some point. Maybe we'll have another podcast sooner than 6 months from now. It could happen. Anything could happen. All righty. I'm going to end the recording. Signing off.
Bye. I miss you.